Hi, George Durkee, Geography 61, our Introduction to Incident Mapping class. And this will be a set of two videos supplemental to the Fire and SAR map lessons. And I'm just going to add some stuff on symbology and label placement that you might find useful on this or other maps. Some of you are continuing to tinker away. None of this will be required for the assignment maps, but if you want to add them in, that's great. We did the same thing, as you remember, for our last class on basic mapping. And then in the next video, I'll show you how to share your map to ArcGIS Online. I originally required this for this class, but people were so far behind, I dropped that. But it's a useful thing to know, and ArcGIS Pro, as I think I've mentioned, is designed to work with ArcGIS Online such that you can share data back and forth. So that'll be the next video. So as I've also mentioned, your goal in life on any emergency incident map is to do your map and get it out the door, get it to your field teams so that they can get to work, either find the person or get to the fire or whatever they're up to. And there's a tendency to just tinker forever with maps, you know, get everything just right and get the symbology and colors and labels, you know, in just the right place. But as I was told when I took the Forest Service Fire Incident Mapping class, you know, carry a black marker with you. And so, you know, make the changes. If you see something horribly wrong and you're handing out maps, don't go back. Just make the correction, hand out your map, and get people going. That's what you need to do. But that said, there's some stuff we could learn here that I didn't cover in the class. And like I said, these won't be required on any of your maps, but I think it's pretty useful for both this class if you want to add it, and for future maps you'll make it pretty integral to understanding ArcPro. And this is roughly what I did for those of you who were in my basic maps class last month, is, you know, just added a few tips and tricks. So we'll do that here. So for instance, you may remember that for our polygon symbol, we increased the transparency for the entire polygon, so so you could see the terrain underneath. And obviously you want that because you want people to understand the kind of terrain they'll be getting into, and you want your map to, as closely as possible, represent the terrain. You know, they say the map is not the territory, but and I've said this elsewhere, you want your map to be as close to a representation of the terrain as is useful for your field people. So in this case, what we're going to do is, if you remember here, we increase the transparency. I've got it about 80% here. So for what I'm going to show here, we're going to put it back to its original here. So obviously you're not seeing through. And then we're going to go to the symbol itself. And I'm now in, I clicked on the color chip there and brought up symbology SAR segments, which is within the symbology appearance pane. And so if you get into this pane, you click on the color chip, and I want you to go into the layers, because this particular symbol is made up. You can see the tiny little red dots here. It was custom made as part of our SAR symbol set for SAR segments. So there's several layers making it up. You've got this gray line here, which doesn't do a whole lot at this zoom level, and then you've got the red line, which is the boundary, and then you've got the yellow fill. And notice how it changes down here, but until I apply it, it doesn't actually change in the on the map. So I just reduced the transparency to 0, but you can choose to do it for just the color layer of the symbology. So for that, you go to Appearance and Color, and down here to Color Properties, and then you just use the bottom slider bar, increase transparency, and if you remember, we had it around 80%, but you can fool around and see what works. There's 79%. So then you just OK that. And the red, green, blue here, incidentally, is a whole nother way of adjusting the color. And a lot of times you'll run into a lesson where or a need where you can make actually a custom color and then just mix the red, green, and blue to what you want. And click OK, and it's changed it over here. So let's apply it, see what we end up with. There we go. So we've got about the same thing there. But notice the advantage of that is we keep the solid line there showing the boundary of each team's segment, whereas before it was faded. So that's a useful thing. And if you want to fade any of those, and this is pretty useful with most any color you work with, quite often increasing the transparency of a label or anything like that on a map it just helps the visual appearance of it. So next, let's look at label placement and some things you can do there that we didn't go into much depth in the other couple of maps. So right now we actually have reasonably good balance. The labels for the clues aren't great right now. They're just a basic text. And for the polygons segments, they're pretty good as is. Notice that the segment 3, which we've set it up so that the segment name label can show up either in the polygon, or if that doesn't work, it can go outside the polygon. But there's a couple of conditions where it's not going to show up very well for that small, thin polygon. So I'll show you what you can do if we zoom in here. There we go. Yeah, so there you go. You just get this little squiggle here because it doesn't render correctly. So I'll show you what you can do there. So let's go over to labeling. And you bring up your label placement, label class, SAR segments. So when you're working with label placement, get a feel for the placement type. You can go regular, land parcel, or boundary or river here. So notice what happens when we do boundary is it puts it right on the boundary. Well, we could use that, but it looks a little bit weird. But that's good where you have a county boundary or a state boundary, and you want to show what's on either side. California, Nevada, or whatever. And then river is obviously for rivers, and land parcel placement is to get it within the parcel. But we're going to stick with regular here because we kind of want it centered. And then again, you can fool around with, where it is in the polygon, straight, horizontal, curved. So if you have roads and things like that, and curved would be good here, but for the rest of it, it's not quite what we want. Or curved around polygon, and that actually kind of works, but for the rest of them, it doesn't. So let's stick with straight and polygon. Anyway, the point of that is try different settings and see what works, and just get an idea of what's best for what you're working with, and also obviously to get a feel for it. In any event, we want to check may place label outside polygon, but that doesn't quite do it here. And then once you've activated that, notice that you can then set up an order at which it looks for where it wants to be, or where it can be placed, and you can number each for the priority you want it to take. So upper right is the first priority, and then hard right is third, and so on around. And that takes a while to fool with, though. So what we're going to actually do here is go to the fitting strategy, and we'll go to overrun. So overrun is where you have such a small polygon that you're telling the the Maplex label engine that it doesn't have to stay within the confines of the polygon. So it can use the space just outside the polygon. So let's just increase it here and see what happens. So I started moving it up to 11, and there you go. It shows up again, and then we can you can just fool around with that back and forth and see what does best. I must have left it for straight and polygon, and that's not really what I want. Horizontal is what I want here. There we go, fixed it. So you can see that, you know, you can just fiddle with this stuff endlessly. And as I said, you know, for incident mapping anyway, you want stuff out the door quickly. But become familiar with the various tools and what they do ahead of time so that you can just move quickly. So next, let's see if we can improve the clues and the point last seen, or last known point here, and improve the labels that we created for those. So you go ahead and outline SAR points, and we're already in label, so let's see what we can do here. And into placement, and right now we've got it at best position, but I think we want it on the right in both cases, either top right or lower right. So let's go right of point and see what that does. Well, it didn't do it over here because the segment interferes with it. And notice also that you can set the offset, and at the moment we've got it set to 1, which is about right, but it can move farther away from the center of the point. So if we move it up a little bit here, it moves out a little bit, but let's keep it in closer, right there. And obviously you want the label associated with the point. So we're really not aiming for any particular perfect placement or anything here, but what I want folks to do is become familiar with the various placement properties and tools within the label engine here. So right now we have it at you know, right of point here, and then some of your other, we'll stay here, in the offset, and you can orient it, but for what we're doing here, you don't want to, you won't need to fool with that. But let's take another look here at your fitting strategy, and this allows you to stack the both the labels and the label text. So for instance, if we, right now it's choosing best, but if we go entirely right, it goes on a right margin there. Constrain right, constrain left. But we're just gonna, so fool around with that, you know, that centers it, and we'll just choose best there. And you can also set the number of characters or the number of lines. So right now, obviously, you know, it's 3 lines, and that's fine for that particular clue. Had we reduced it to 2 lines, then nothing would have happened. Well, anyway, you can see what happens there, and number of characters per line, and so on and so forth. And for street placement, you can also abbreviate. So, you know, for instance, if it's street or road, there's a dictionary, so it'll go RD or ST, and you can even set your own abbreviations. But we won't need to do that. And you can also reduce the size to fit in, so we could reduce the font size. But, you know, again, for what we're doing here, that doesn't really apply. But one thing we can do that'll affect, so for instance, how it prioritizes with the segment labels is we can, in placement, you can give it a feature weight. So 1,000 gives it absolute priority over everything. So that means the segment would never take priority over the label for the points. And then you can also set the segment weight a little less than the labels for the points. But anyway, you know, once again, just if you have time, you've already finished your assignment, and/or you have time, just fool around with the various placement strategies here and see how it affects things and get a feel for it. And incidentally, the S3 MOOC, as you know, I've recommended that often on cartography with Ken Fields and John Nelson. The whole thing is great, but the fourth exercise, the fourth week, has a terrific section just on labeling and what you can do. So maybe you don't have time for the whole thing, but it would sure be worth signing up and just doing the fourth week's lesson and learn about labeling. But of course, there's also a bunch of YouTube videos online that go into pretty good depth on labeling and the Maplex label engine, which is what's in ArcGIS Pro. So let's do two more things here. Let's improve the labels themselves. Notice how I zoom in; it does go over to the right there. And let's make that a little darker and make it look like it goes with the red of the point last seen and clue. So for that, we just go back here to symbol and appearance, and you can do a couple of things here. For the text fill symbol, we can for color, we can choose red here. That might be overdoing it just a little bit. And we'll have to do that separately for clues. And let's choose bold, see how that comes out. And 10 points probably good. Maybe let's go to 12 and see what happens. And apply. Might be a little overdone. But, you know, once again, we're just fooling around here. And let's try a very small halo here. As you know, I've been getting away from halos, but they're sometimes useful. And we'll keep it at 1 point. Notice what happens if we go up to 2 points. It's not bad, but let's just keep it to 1 point. And one thing you can also do for the halo is you can do the same thing we did for the segment color, is that you can increase the transparency so it's not as overwhelming. So if you just keep it at 1 point and increase the transparency, then it's not as overwhelming of the label as it might be. And so that reduces, you know, the big glaring halo a little bit. Okay, one more thing we can do here, and it's kind of a minor point, but it's yet another fun little tool and technique here. Notice that the red of the symbol there and the red of the label are not quite the same. Now, this isn't something that you're going to do in emergency mapping, but we'll just take a look at it anyway. Because what you can do is you go down here to the eyedropper and you hover over and you try and get that same red, and it changes it theoretically to the same red, and then you apply it. And so it still doesn't show up quite the same, but in any event, it's pretty good. Okay, now you do the same thing with the clues, but we won't do it here. Okay, the last thing we're going to do here is we're going to put a label on the team GPS track over here. You'll notice it doesn't have a label with it, and that's because it was derived directly from the GPS points, which we converted into a line using either DNR, Garmin, or the tool within Arc Pro point to line tool. You can do either. And so it could only carry over the information in the garment here. So let's take a look at the attribute table. And notice here, these are the fields that are part of it. You get lat long, and you do have a place for a comment and link, but there's no label. So we could actually just use the comment field and fill in team 2. But let's create a whole new field and put team 2 in. So for that, again, I'm in the attribute table, and I'm going to add a field. And so you get a whole new box here. And so there's all the fields that are in there right now, and it adds one down below. So let's just go label, or you could put team, either one. And the data type is going to be text. There we go, text, and then enter. And remember to save. This is I don't know if I've emphasized this in previous. I know I didn't in one of the videos, but be sure you go up here and save, because otherwise it won't take effect. So we just save it there. And now we have a label field. So let's go back to team 2 and let's go to edit. Let's turn on the editing tool and just team 2. I will fill them in for each one, even though that might create duplicates, but let's, okay. So now let's save that. Yeah, save all edits and get out of editing. And let's just close our attribute table boxes here. Get a little more real estate. Let's close the points. And now let's add a label to the team GPS track. So up here to labeling, and incidentally, you can also turn on labeling by right-clicking and going to label, and that turns it on there as well. And now we have to choose a feature to label. Unfortunately, we have label right there. Okay, so notice that makes a whole bunch of team 2 here, which we may or may not want. It's possible we do, because that's a huge GPS track, and I think it's a couple of days of search track that we strung all together. Incidentally, you know, when a team goes out for a couple of days, and they were in, each team was in for 2 or 3 days, so their track is continuous with one GPS, and so you know, sometimes they'll save each day's search for analysis later, but we don't get the GPS track sometimes for 2 or 3 days. Anyway, so let's at least change the color of the text, and let's go into symbol, and let's change that to some sort of orange. And we could do the let's try that and see what happens. Apply. Yeah, it's a little faint, but let's put that up to 12 point and bold and apply that, see what happens. Yeah, and I think that does call for a halo just to distinguish it from the track itself. Let's try a black halo, see what happens. Or even a gray, haha. This is another case of, you know, getting carried away with this stuff. No, that's not it. Stick with white. Yeah, that's better. And now let's go into the position and let's remove duplicate labels. Let's remove all and see what we end up with. No, we want a couple in there. So let's remove within a fixed distance. And so right now it's set at 150 points. So that's the distance there to there. And that looks pretty good. We could reduce that to 100. Let's just do that and see what happens. Yeah, we still end up with the same number. So let's stick with that. And you know, I'll emphasize this a few times here, is just to learn this stuff and start getting in there and getting a feel for the tools so that when you do need them, you know, you can go pretty quickly. And I will repeat, we don't want the segment, there we go, overlapping the labels for the clues. But anyway, that's another weighted thing. We'd want segment farther away. So I'm just showing here the various settings that are available, and they're almost too many and too complicated in some ways. I mean, you just want to label up there and you want to get out of Dodge and hand the map out. And that's even true, you know, if you're working on a map for a business or class assignment or whatever. You can really get down a rabbit hole here. But with just a few basic tools here, you can get it set up reasonably well and you know, send it out. And so just criticizing my own stuff here, I think the text size there is a little too big and overwhelming. But again, you know, if you want to emphasize the clues and the point last seen, then you might want that fairly big. And another thing we can do here is we can also set out beyond. So for instance, for team 2, let's not have that out beyond 1 to 24K. So right now it's 1 to 30K. So as we zoom in, it'll appear at 1 to 24K. And that's about right. That's what we'd want. And the same with the clues. So let's go to the SAR points and let's set that at, well, let's set that at 1 to 30. Oh, I just set it at 1 to 24. Yeah, sure. Anyway, you can see how to do that and zoom in, and then it shows up when we get below 1 to 24. Okay, let's go out because I've also saved a bookmark at what we opened up with here, so let's do that. And so, well, once again, endless fiddling. Maybe we do want the clue, the SAR point showing, because this is the full search, and so perhaps we do in fact want the clue type to show in addition to just the symbol, because it would be informational if you're using this as an IAP map or something like that. But let's just call this, and for placement and feature weight, you might want to change the feature weight of the segment, for instance, so it doesn't crowd the point symbols there. Okay, that's good. In the next video, we'll do how to share this map, how to post it online, and we'll do it the easy way and the hard way, and show you some troubleshooting steps. Okay, thanks a lot. See you in the next video.